Trump labeled Ibrahim Traore as Africa's puppet leader on social media, mocking him by saying, "He's coming to lecture us on economics while his country is starving." Western leaders laughed, but Traore remained silent. 48 hours later, at the International Economic Summit in Geneva, Traore took the stage. His 7-minute speech stunned the room and humiliated Trump. As the speech went viral worldwide, 27 countries lined up to sign new trade agreements with Burkina Faso. Trump was forced to leave the hall. The morning sun gleamed on the glass facade of the United Nations building in Geneva. Inside, world leaders had gathered for the Global Economic Equality Summit. This summit was vital for developing nations, as it would lay the foundations for economic cooperation agreements for the next decade. President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso entered the hall with a modest delegation of only 3 people, drawing many eyes. Representatives of other African nations greeted him respectfully, while Western diplomats whispered among themselves. Traore wore a jacket with traditional Burkina Faso motifs and simple trousers. His unassuming yet dignified presence contrasted with the expensive suits and large entourages of other leaders in the room. However, this summit had already been charged with tension due to an incident 48 hours earlier. Former U.S. President Donald Trump had made a shocking post on his new social media platform. Today, Africa's puppet leaders are coming to Geneva to give the world economics lessons, especially Mr. Traore from Burkina Faso. He'll be giving us advice while his country starves. Haha. He should clean his own backyard first. #aid to Africa #poor leaders. The message instantly went viral, receiving millions of interactions. World press was filled with headlines about Trump's African insult. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera discussed the topic in live broadcasts, with experts analyzing how Traore would respond to this insult. The broadcasts emphasized that Trump's claims about Burkina Faso were based on completely incorrect information, but nonetheless discussed how these words could lead to a diplomatic crisis. When Traore landed at the airport, he gently deflected reporters' questions. "I will speak when the time is right," was all he said, with a modest smile. This silence only increased curiosity in international diplomatic circles. Some African leaders had called Traore to express their support, offering to make a joint statement against Trump. However, Traore had politely declined these offers as well. His plan was quite different. During the summit's opening session, leaders of major countries took turns at the podium. Trump was among the speakers, having been specially invited by his close ally Gustav Herrmann, the Swiss Minister of Economy who was hosting the summit. When Trump entered the hall, some delegations chose to protest silently by not standing up, but most diplomats acted professionally. As Trump spoke, the hall screens displayed carefully selected graphics showing Africa's problems: high unemployment, low education levels, health issues. However, most of these graphics were based on outdated data. Africa needs help, but its leaders are failing to produce solutions, Trump said, looking directly toward where Traore was seated. Especially some leaders who have emerged with populist rhetoric in recent years are causing their own people to starve. They're moving away from the West, then asking for help. What Africa needs is more Western investment and to adopt our economic model. At the end of his speech, Trump made an unexpected remark. Soon, Mr. Traore from Burkina Faso will speak at this podium. A small piece of advice: Don't take economics lessons from someone who knows little about economics. Upon these words, some Western delegates smiled, while others couldn't hide their discomfort. The hall filled with mixed reactions. Most Western diplomats nodded in agreement, while African, Asian, and Latin American delegations could not hide their discomfort. Ibrahim Traore, however, continued taking notes calmly, his face showing no change in expression. When his advisor whispered something to him, he simply nodded in agreement. In the afternoon session, when it was time for African nations to speak, an unexpected development occurred. The summit program had allocated only 3 minutes for Traore's speech. While the great powers were given 15 minutes each, this was clearly an inequality. But Herman suddenly made a change. "Mr. Traore," said Herman with a slightly mocking tone, "I see you want to respond to some of our messages. Our program is packed, but I'll give you 5 minutes. Please be brief and concise." Traore slowly stood up. The hall fell silent as he walked toward the podium. Traore's modest appearance contrasted with Trump's flashy style. Everyone seemed to expect a harsh response to Trump's insulting words. Perhaps a scandal would erupt. Perhaps a diplomatic crisis would unfold. However, when he reached the podium, Traore's face showed a calm and confident expression. "Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates," he said in a soft yet powerful voice, "I am expected to defend myself. But I am here today to defend not myself, but the truth." There was complete silence in the hall. Traore opened a thin folder he had brought with him and began the speech that would astonish the world. In the last 3 years, Burkina Faso's economic growth has reached 8.5%. Unemployment has dropped from 22% to 9%. The education rate of our young population has risen from 67% to 89%. Our agricultural production has doubled. We achieved all these without receiving any external aid. And yes, Mr. Trump, we did this by creating our own economic model. Traore displayed Burkina Faso's economic data from recent years on the large screen in the hall. The graphs clearly showed the upward trend. Western economists looked at each other in amazement. This data didn't match the information they had because most Western institutions didn't regularly update their data on African countries. "We are not puppets," Traore continued, his voice growing stronger. "We are a people who determine our own destiny, who manage our own resources. We now know how the aid you have given us for hundreds of years has turned into chains." A slight murmur rose from the hall. Trump shifted uncomfortably and whispered something to his advisor. Traore showed the next graph on the screen, a comparison of aid given to Africa by Western countries versus the value of natural resources extracted from Africa. The difference was striking. The value taken from Africa was exactly 17.3 times the aid. "This is what a puppet economy really looks like," said Traore, without looking directly at Trump. "Appearing to help someone while actually taking 17 times more from them. This is not cooperation. It is a modern system of exploitation." The hall was in shock. Some delegates were hastily checking their tablets to verify the data sources. Trump was visibly uncomfortable. His advisors were whispering to each other with concern. "We now reject this model," said Traore. "We propose a new model, a model based on fair trade, true partnership, and mutual respect. We don't want aid. We want trade on equal terms." Then he made a move that surprised the hall even more. The screen displayed details of an innovative economic model developed by Burkina Faso, called the Valuable Resources Initiative. This model involved processing natural resources and creating added value within the country. "We are no longer just a country exporting raw materials," said Traore. "We process our gold, our cotton, our manganese, and present them to world markets. We educate our youth in engineering, software, and sustainable agriculture. We develop technology. And while doing all this, we show respect for nature." The screen displayed images of sustainable agriculture projects Burkina Faso had established in the Sahel region, solar-powered irrigation systems, and digital education centers. These were African success stories that the media usually avoided showing. Traore had reached the most striking part of his speech. He opened a small box he took from his pocket. Inside was a shiny chip. This microchip was produced in Burkina Faso, using entirely local technology and raw materials. It was designed and manufactured by our young engineers at Ouagadougou Technology University. We use it in our solar-powered agricultural equipment. Last year, farmers using this technology increased their yield by 60%. The hall began to murmur in amazement. Most people had no idea Burkina Faso had made such a technological breakthrough. Trump's face was getting increasingly red. Herman anxiously looked at his watch. Traore's speaking time was long over, but no one dared to stop him. "Those who call us puppets may be trying to hide their own economic failures by belittling us," said Traore, subtly referencing Trump. "But facts are stubborn, and the fact is, Africa is rising. We are no longer as you see us. We are as we see ourselves." Traore ended his words with an important call. "I invite all countries to examine this new economic model and to trade with us on equal terms. Because the future lies in the development, not just of some countries, but of the entire world. The future lies in equality and mutual respect. Thank you." When Traore stepped down from the podium, something unexpected happened. First, the African delegations, then the Asian and Latin American representatives, and finally some European delegates stood up and began applauding him. The applause lasted for minutes. Some delegates couldn't hide their tears. This was not just a speech, it was a historic moment. Trump, his face reddened, was talking angrily with those next to him. Herman was trying to regain control of the program, but the hall was still under Traore's influence. After a while, Trump whispered something to his advisor's ear and left the hall. This move didn't escape the cameras and instantly made it to the headlines of news agencies. Trump leaves summit after Traore's speech. At the evening dinner, representatives from many countries came to Traore's table to congratulate him. Among them were representatives of economic powers like Germany, Japan, India, and Brazil. All wanted to learn more about the model developed by Burkina Faso. "President Traore," said German Economy Minister Friedrich Müller, "your speech was not only impressive, but also enlightening. I understand that we need to rethink Africa-Europe relations." Later in the evening, Chinese Trade Minister Li Wei approached Traore. "President Traore, your speech was impressive. As China, we want to examine the Valuable Resources Initiative and discuss possible areas of cooperation. Especially your work on agricultural technologies is very interesting." This was just the beginning. The next day, India, Brazil, South Korea, and 12 European countries announced they wanted to start economic partnership talks with Burkina Faso. Within 2 days, a total of 27 countries took official steps for new trade agreements with Burkina Faso. The video of Traore's speech spread quickly on social media. Within 24 hours, the video reached 150 million views. Comments were mostly positive and supportive. Young people from many African countries described Traore as Africa's pride. Western academics and economists had begun to analyze the Burkina Faso model. After leaving the summit early, Trump appeared before reporters at the Geneva airport. Mr. Traore's country's achievements are impressive, but they happened thanks to our aid, he said, trying to distort the subject. However, when a journalist asked, but in the speech, it was stated that Burkina Faso hasn't received any foreign aid in the last 3 years. Is this true? Trump left the question unanswered and walked away. He didn't write another word about Traore on his social media. He had quietly deleted his previous message. At the closing of the summit, host Herman made an interesting confession in his press statement. President Traore's speech was eye-opening for many of us. We should reassess our perspective on Africa. Perhaps we have misunderstood a continent for years. A month later, a major economic conference titled Africa's Future was held in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Leaders, business people, and academics from around the world attended this conference. All had come to examine the Burkina Faso model on site. As Traore welcomed them at the airport, he maintained his modest demeanor. Instead of a crowded protocol or a lavish welcome ceremony, he greeted his guests with just a few ministers and university students. "Welcome," he said to his guests. "We will show you not the show, but the reality. Burkina Faso's story is not the story of one person, but the story of a people." On the first day of the conference, guests visited agricultural projects and technology centers outside Ouagadougou. On the second day, they listened to presentations about the details and applications of the Valuable Resources Initiative. On the final day, new cooperation agreements were signed. These agreements were far from the traditional aid model, being true partnerships based on mutual benefit and respect. On the final day of the conference, a journalist asked Traore, "When responding to Trump's words, did you feel like you were taking personal revenge?" Traore smiled. "This was never a personal matter. This was about defending Africa's honor and potential. We have now turned a new page. And on this page, both our friends and our enemies are on equal footing. What matters is what we can do together to build a more just world." Traore's 7-minute speech in Geneva not only silenced Trump, it redefined Africa's place in the world economy. 6 months after the speech, Burkina Faso's economic model had begun to be adopted by 14 African countries. In international diplomatic circles, it had become an idiom. The Traore effect, the great power behind a modest appearance. And it all started with a disparaging message written on social media. There was now a saying circulating among the people of Burkina Faso: "Sometimes the greatest opportunities arise from the greatest insults." That day on the stage in Geneva, Africa didn't just speak, it showed the world a new path. And this path was built on equality, respect, and true cooperation.